Welcome back to another episode of the Owl Talk podcast. In this episode, we are talking once again about student athletes, but this time around, we're going to focus on powerlifting and competitive weightlifting. I'm sure that our men around the country are aware of how much the world has moved towards promoting and elevating physical health in the last 10 years or so. And that has been a great thing for many reasons, not the least of which are the mental health benefits and the longevity benefits that come from working out and staying fit. Today, I'm glad to be joined by Tyler Sonnett from our Theta-Omega Chapter at Middle Tennessee State University. Tyler is a competitive weightlifter and the U.S. Powerlifting Association's 2024 tested national champion in the men's open 75 kilogram weight class. That's 165 pounds for those of us who use the imperial system. And he's also the national champion in the men's junior division for 20 to 23-year-olds. In total, he lifted 1,471.6 pounds, which is mind-boggling. Can't wait to talk about it. Welcome to the Owl Talk podcast, Tyler.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is my first time doing anything like this, but I'm hoping that I can share some of my experiences with everybody listening.
I can't wait. This is going to be awesome. So let's jump right into it. Maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about you and your history. Where are you from? What brought you to Middle Tennessee State? What do you study? And then maybe tell us a little bit about what brought you to Theta-Omega Chapter in Sigma Pi.
So I grew up in Southern Maryland, a town called Upper Marlboro. It's about an hour and a half southeast of DC. And I grew up, flying, building rockets and model airplanes. And so when it was time to look for a college, I started looking around. I looked at Auburn, I looked at Middle Tennessee, I looked at Embry-Riddle, and I ended up here at Middle Tennessee because they have a wonderful aerospace program. I'm studying aerospace engineering here, and I'm on track to hopefully get a master's once I'm done with my bachelor's, which I can do here. I'm not sure if I will, but um, I, as far as why I joined Theta Omega, when I first got to college, I was not wanting to rush a fraternity at all. I had promised my parents that I wouldn't, and I was like, I'm gonna wait. I'm like make it through my freshman year, and that went out the window pretty quickly. First couple of weeks of college. I did the early arrival program here, so I showed up like 2 weeks early. I got to meet a bunch of the people, and that ended up being a couple of the people from Sigma Pi. Both guys that ended up being my pledge brothers and some of the older brothers that were, recruiting new guys for that semester. And so they invited me out to the house that they had just got. It's, on 2.5 acres. We've got like a barn for parties and all of that. So it's a pretty nice setup. And I think that was definitely a large part of why I joined. But it was also, it was the only place that I went that I felt like I didn't get a sales pitch. It wasn't the same thing over and over again. I felt like these were people that I could just hang out with and have fun. So, I've been in the chapter for a little over 2 years now. And I just got elected as the vice president. So for this upcoming year, I'll be on our chapter's e-board. But
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you.
I'm sure that's a new dynamic for you going from being a member of the chapter to now being on the leadership team.
Yeah, definitely. I was the assistant pledge ed for the last year, which wasn't a particularly challenging job. It was just kind of picking up the slack for everybody else and making sure things ran smoothly. But I was ready for kind of that next step to taking on a little bit more responsibility for the chapter.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a difference in what's required of the assistant pledge educator versus the vice president of the chapter. You've got a whole lot of responsibility on your plate now, and I know you're going to enjoy it. It's a good experience. I hope you enjoy it over the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so.
And I have to mention, Middle Tennessee State, the university, has had such astronomical growth and is such a great place for you to learn about, your major. I think you made a really good choice going there. And I'm from New Jersey, so I'm not in that world down there, but Middle Tennessee State has done so well in terms of its outreach and its academic programs that we even hear about them way up here in the north. So good choice, and good choice at Theta-Omega Chapter, one of our outstanding chapters out there around the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Tyler, I want to learn as much as possible about competitive weightlifting and powerlifting. How do you go from conceivably someone who just liked working out to being a competitive powerlifter? Maybe you can take us inside that world for a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'll start off by kind of explaining a little bit of how it works for the people that maybe don't know.
Yeah,
So,
assume that I and our listeners don't know anything.
yeah, so the powerlifting is done, you go to these meets to compete. You have three different lifts. It starts with squat, then you bench, and then you deadlift. Usually it's an all day thing, so you get an hour or so in between. But you get three attempts for each lift. And there's a lot of very specific rules that I won't get into for each lift on whether it's good or not. But each attempt has to be progressively heavier. So you start with something that you know you can get 100% every time, right? And then you go a little bit heavier, and then your last one, if you get your second one, is meant to be, all out, everything that you've got, kind of at the absolute limit of what you can do. And the goal is to put together the highest total in your weight class between the three lifts. So they take your heaviest attempt that you are able to complete from each of the three lifts and they add it together. And so that's where you get that 1471 total that I did out at nationals. I'm hoping to beat that by quite a bit this coming year, but yeah.
What do
The
you
next
just out of curiosity, what do you hope to beat it by? Because that's an astronomical number already. What are you hoping for?
I would like between 1650 and 1700. I'm competing again here at a local meet in Murfreesboro that's put on by the gym I train at on the 18th of January. So I'll probably already have competed by the time this episode comes out. But I'm hoping to get 1600 there. It's looking like it might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'll at least get close. So I think that'll put me in a good position to do, mid to high 1600s at nationals this year.
Amazing, amazing. How often do you train?
So I train between 4 and 5 days a week. I think any more than that, and it would just be too much for me to recover from. It's pretty substantial workouts, especially at the beginning of the training when it's a lot of heavy volume and, kind of getting your body used to having that much load on your muscles repeatedly, every single week. So yeah, I typically train between 4 and 5 days a week. I try to take Wednesday off and then one or both days on the weekends off. But I have a pretty strict program that I try to stick to.
Maybe you can talk to us for a moment about that program. What does it look like? How does it work? How long is it every day that you train? What does that program look like?
So generally, I do about a 12-week prep for each of these meets that I compete at. This one was a little bit shorter because I competed back at the beginning of November, and then I took a couple of weeks off to kind of let my body recover. So I did about 10 weeks here, or I will have by the time I'm done. It's essentially divided into two halves, and we call them blocks. Each block, it starts with not a whole lot of weight and kind of a ton of volume. So you're doing a lot of reps, but not super heavy. And it's meant to like build up the fatigue in your body. It's meant to be just slightly more than you can recover from. As you go through that block, usually it's 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes up to six. You steadily increase the weight and lower the volume until you get to the peak week. And there's one right in the middle of prep, which is where I'll go really heavy on each of the individual lists and kind of figure out where I am and what I would be looking at for the next block. And then between the two, I have what's called a deload week. So I go a little bit lighter It's meant to let my body recover from that fatigue that I've built up over the previous 4 or 5 weeks. And then it goes into the final peaking block, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm nearing the end of that, and that'll be even less volume and even more weight as I get going heavier and heavier in preparation for this meet. And then I have one final deload week right before I compete. Just take it easy, let my body recover, get ready for the competition day. So I'm coming in, not with injuries and feeling good and all that. So
When you're ramping up for one of these competitions, do you find that your time in the gym each day increases or decreases?
I would say it probably decreases. When I'm going heavier, I like to take a lot longer breaks between sets. Like sometimes it'll be upwards of like 5 to 10 minutes. If it's really heavy, just to kind of give my nervous system a chance to recover. So I think it stays more or less consistent. I usually try to be done in under 2 hours between the main compound that I'm doing for the day and then the various accessories that I do along with that. But yeah, towards the end it's a little bit quicker because I have just less sets to do, less volume.
It's good evidence that you don't need to spend hours and hours and hours in the gym to compete at a very high level. You just have to make sure the time that you do spend is spent effectively and efficiently, which it seems like you're doing.
Yeah, I think overtraining is definitely a real thing. When you're first starting out going to the gym, it's pretty hard to do that because you haven't built up the nervous system to be able to push your body that hard. But after you've been doing it for years and years, I mean, there's a point where you're going to be able to do more every day than your body is able to recover from. That can really kind of get in the way of progress a lot of times.
That's good information for our listeners to know. Now, let's talk about the national championship a little bit. Again, talk to us about just the experience of being there, and how many people were you competing against, and maybe help paint a picture for our listeners about that whole experience.
Yeah, so the national championship last year was out in Vegas. It was in the Flamingo Casino, their huge ballroom,
Already
and
sounds amazing.
yeah, it was a pretty cool venue. They had these huge chandeliers up on the ceiling. They had three different platforms in the same room. There's a pretty big crowd when I was competing. Probably, I don't know, a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 people. It was pretty substantial, and it was live streamed to a couple hundred more. I definitely felt the pressure of a little bit. That was my first time beating at anything like that. It's a week long event between all the weight classes and the different age divisions, the juniors and the masters, and then the open. There was, I think, about 1,000 people that were competing there. For the open division, I had 26 other people in my weight class, and then for the junior division, there was 9 others. Definitely a lot more than I'm used to. Most of these local meets, there's usually only 2 or 3 other people in your weight class, which makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, the nationals experience was kind of surreal. You prep for 12 weeks, not knowing what you're getting into, and then you show up at this huge venue with all these people. It was also my first time cutting weight, which was not fun. I compete at 165 pounds, but I don't walk around weighing that much. I'm usually 175 to 180, and so I'll cut all of that weight more or less the day before.
Oh my gosh.
The day before I have to weigh in. So yeah, it's not a fun process to have to do. I just kind of dehydrate myself out in the sauna and all that just for hours, and it's not a good feeling, but it does feel good once I make weight and I get to eat and drink whatever I want for the 24 hours leading up to competition. Doing that out in Vegas was definitely not fun with the low humidity. I'm already really thirsty because I'm not allowed to have any water and I'm like sweating out everything. And then it being like, 10% humidity out there just made it so much worse. Definitely something I'm looking forward to doing again. Maybe not the weight cut, but that's kind of a necessary evil.
So where is the next national competition?
They haven't announced it yet. It'll probably be in July. I would assume back in Las Vegas. It seems like a lot of the big meets are out there. Maybe it'll be over here on the East Coast. I don't know. I don't know where they did the one the year before because I wasn't competing then, or at least not at a level to make it out there. I don't know. They're doing junior nationals for high school and college powerlifters in New Orleans in April, which I'm debating on whether I'm going to do or not. That'll be determined by the date of the real big national championships.
Is there a group of powerlifters that you're connected to, maybe folks that you met at the national tournament or the people that you've met leading up to that tournament that you keep in touch with?
Yeah, there was definitely a couple of people that I met out there. A lot of the other guys that I was competing against, who are coming from all over. A lot of them are considerably older than I am, especially in the open division, where, age is not a factor. There's a lot of guys that are, easily 10 years older than me that I'm competing against and that have a lot more experience. So it was cool to be able to hear from a lot of the people that had been there before. I talked to the guy that won the year before, and he was pretty cool. He ended up going up a weight class, which was lucky for me because he probably would have beat me. Yeah, I do keep up with a couple of them. There's a couple other powerlifters at the gym I train at. I don't train with them, but I talk to them from time to time.
It sounds like it's a good support system, a good support structure and network that you have, which gets me to my next question, which is, hey, we're a Sigma Pi podcast. So can you talk to our listeners for a little bit about what you learned or what you experienced in Sigma Pi that helps you in your powerlifting competition?
Yeah, well, I think definitely having people to train with definitely is a big part. I don't always lift with my fraternity brothers because none of them compete, and so they don't always want to do what I'm doing. But from time to time, especially in the off season, having that kind of group of people that even if they're not training with me, they're still there at the gym most of the time. I mean, we have like almost half our chapter that goes to the same gym. It's not the school gym, but it's right off campus and it's right down the street from our house. So it's nice to have that kind of like you said, the support group, people to kind of watch you and give you a spot if you need and all that. So
Yeah, there's a camaraderie there. There's a built-in support network, which is what fraternities are all about. And so the fact that you've got chapter brothers that you can work out with, that's great. That's great. So now I have the reverse question for you. What did you learn from competitive powerlifting that you bring with you into the world of Sigma Pi fraternity and that might help you now as you become the VP of your chapter?
that's a tough one. I think definitely the discipline that it takes for that training, especially like holding an e-board position or really any position in the chapter. Like you have to be able to do what's required of that job when it needs to be done. And the same is kind of true with powerlifting. Like I have a plan and it doesn't work out unless I stick to it. And it's the same thing with helping to run the chapter. We come up with a plan as a group and unless everybody sticks to it, it doesn't benefit us.
Yeah, good lesson. Good lesson to learn and to bring with you in your new leadership role in the chapter, which I know you're going to be great at because of the very reason you just said. You have all this discipline and all this focus and concentration from powerlifting. That's going to serve you very well being the vice president of your chapter.
Absolutely.
And then, maybe one of my final questions for you is about you, Tyler. Tell me, what does the future hold for you? You mentioned before about a master's, but what comes up next?
Well, as of now, I'm working as a real estate agent here in Nashville. So I work kind of part time while I'm going to school. It's not something that I have regular hours for. It's kind of I work when duty calls, but I think that's something I'll continue to do while I'm here, whether or not I go for a master's, just to have kind of the money to keep going and not have to take out student loans and things like that. But ideally, I think I would like to do something related to aerospace. whether it's flying or it's engineering or whatever it might be. I think that's ultimately what I would like to do. But having the financial freedom to be able to kind of explore around is definitely something that I wanted and something that I'm working very hard towards.
It's such a cool field to get into. When you think about like future expansion in industry, not just in this country but around the world, aerospace. I mean, that's the way to go. We are going to be an interplanetary species sooner or later. I'm telling you.
Absolutely, we're right down the road from Huntsville where they're building the rockets.
Well, look, this has been great. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, Tyler. Before we go, maybe you have some parting thoughts for our listeners.
Absolutely. If you have an interest in competing, I would urge you to go for it. The barrier to entry is fairly low. You're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. But yeah, whether your goal is competing, or it's running a marathon or, anything else fitness related, I would urge you to go for it. There's not much you'll regret once you have done it. Yeah, I'm glad that I decided to start competing. It's gotten me where I am today, and it's gotten me amazing opportunities like this. So yeah, for that, I'm pretty grateful.
Awesome. And congratulations on all of your success, Tyler. Thank you for being a guest on Owl Talk and for bringing us into the world of being a student athlete who's excelling at competitive powerlifting. For all of our listeners, remember that you can stay up to date on the latest in the world of Sigma Pi fraternity by following us across social media. We are at Sigma Pi, all one word, on Instagram, X, and Facebook. On YouTube, we are at Sigma Pi fraternity, also all one word. Thank you to everyone who listened to this episode, and we look forward to you joining us for the next Owl Talk podcast.